Hi everyone, we are here to finish off the 2022 WBC Finals commentary. We saved a great one for the last one to do. It is Patrik Rolf from Sweden. He had a really interesting set. This is also going to be really interesting because we will shoot another video for his 2023 set, and it'll be really interesting to compare the differences to see how Patrik has evolved and changed based on the feedback he received from the set.
Time. Welcome. Today we're gonna play a game together, and the name of that game is Guess the Varietal. If you have a look at the cards in front of you, you will kind of know what to do. I'm gonna team you up in two pairs. Your one team and your one team, and together I want to see if you can figure out which two varietals I'm serving you here today. That's right, I won't be telling you until that very final serving. And the reason for that is because I love to experience new coffees through blind cuppings. And I want to give you that very same opportunity, okay? But don't worry, I have you covered. I'm here to help. We're going to do this together. And please interact. I want you to talk. Coffee is so much more fun when we enjoy it together. Are you ready for that first clue? If you have a look at the green coffee plates in front of you, each table has two green coffees. These are the green coffees I'm serving you today. This is for the espresso course, and this is for the milk beverage course. My first serving today is espresso.
So, really interesting opening. I actually really like this idea where there's games, so the sort of engages the judges. I think they're hard to do well. I think this one's a really interesting one to start to get them to think about what the coffees could be. It gets your judges engaged right away. There's one thing that Patrik does really well. You can go back and watch his Brewer's Cup set, and this is also exemplified there. He speaks a lot with his hands. And often it can look like too much, but there's been many studies where people that speak with their hands are perceived as better speakers, which is why I'm doing this right now. But so Patrik speaking with his hands so much, I actually think aids him. He does this in Brewers as well. I think he does in 2023. I think it's helping him a lot, especially too when you have a bit of a language barrier. When he's saying we're going to do it together, he's bringing things together. I also really like his table settings. I think Patrik always has this minimalist style. It lets him run more simple table setups and more simple sets, but they still look really, really beautiful. If you can make green coffee on a table look beautiful, you've done a good job. So it's a nice opener. I think Patrik's made some smart moves right out of the gate.
And I'm dosing my espresso 19 grams for a total of 42 grams out. This generates the perfect flavor complexity. I roasted this coffee 2 weeks ago with a total development time of 2 minutes. This generates a beautiful body and texture to my espresso. I'm also using chilled portafilter, and this is really interesting as it elevates the aromatic compounds and makes for a more complex experience. Now,
so two things here that are really useful to look at. So he's using chilled portafilters. His espresso input and output are pretty normal, so I think there's not much to say there other than I think he roasts the coffee well because he doesn't have to pull anything too big or too small. But those chilled portafilters, there's a bunch of things that help you here. So number one, I do think that it makes the coffee often taste better, depending on the coffee, but floral coffees I think do a bit better. I did this this year in Athens. The other good thing that it does is it lets you already have them out, which is within the rules. You don't lose any points. So you can have the portafilters out and clean, and that can save you quite a bit of time. You're going to get that score immediately from the tech judges that the portafilters are clean. You know they're clean. They're sitting right there. It's easier to dose into them. So not only is this a strategic decision on how it's affecting flavor, this is also just a strategic decision both on your tech, but also your workflow, because you don't have to wipe those portafilters out. And if you have 3 handles out right away, you've probably saved 10 to 15 seconds in terms of wiping them out, making sure they're dry. So it is quite a big advantage, and I think it's smart. You've seen a lot of competitors do this now.
Now, I would like you to please follow my instructions. I'm going to place the espresso in front of you, and then I want you to please evaluate that crema. But please hold off with tasting until I give you further instructions. For now, I want you to please note down as flavor notes. We're going to find ripe apricot, orange blossom, candied lemon, and a beautiful bergamot. For tactile, we're gonna find a low to medium creamy body with a long-lasting, flavor-intense aftertaste, highlighting that beautiful bergamot. Overall, the sensation of this espresso reminds me of the finest aged champagne. Sparkling, little bit of minerals, plenty of sweetness, a little bit of vibrancy, and that beautiful hint of dryness that just makes the taste experience so much better. Now, I want you to please stir your espresso 5 times in between each sip, and you're welcome to use the white cups in front of you for the spoons. Please enjoy.
So another thing that Patrik does really well is I think he describes coffees quite well. He has 3 citrus calls here. He has orange blossom, candied lemon, and bergamot, which is like a citrus fruit that's found often used to flavor Earl Grey. Those citrus calls, given in someone else's hands, might immediately move the judge to thinking that the coffee is going to be bright or too sour. And I don't think it is. I think Patrik's a great roaster and it's a great coffee. But you could risk, if you have mostly a very citrusy coffee, that the judge might assume that it's going to be this way, and you don't have those preconceived notions. So the way he describes it, he really romanticizes it. He's making sure it's candied lemon. Then we have orange blossom and then bergamot, and all these things, the way he describes them, it does not sound like it's going to be a bright coffee. Even if it is maybe a little bit bright, he does a good job in setting the proper expectation that it's going to be citrusy, but in a way that it doesn't make you think that it's going to be overly bright. Just a really quick thing here, but anytime you're using the Mythos or any grinder that will hold the portafilter, what Patrik just did will save you so much time. Get one portafilter clean, get it completely empty, put it in, let it start grinding, and then move on to the next one. I still see lots of people clean both of them and then put one in, and then you're stuck there waiting anyways. So something as small as this is going to save you some time. It's going to help your workflow. It's going to give you more time to be with the judges or to work on making delicious coffee.
Now, for my milk beverage, I want you to please note down the following flavor notes. We're gonna find strawberries, blackberries, with a little hint of cherry, and a little bit of cacao. I'm gonna pour a total of 80 grams of milk, 220 grams of espresso. There is a beautiful taste balance. The milk that I'm using sits at 4% fat and is unhomogenized. It simply tastes better. Now, we all know that the lactose that we can find in normal cow milk simply isn't for everyone. And I want my milk beverages to be for everyone. So, 24 hours ago, I added 10 drops of a lactase enzyme to 1 liter of my milk. What this does is really interesting. It breaks down the sugar chain of lactose into 2 individual sugars, glucose and galactose. And what's so fun with this is that the human body actually perceives that a lot sweeter than with the combined lactose. So what we have here today is a full-fat milk with plenty of that additional sweetness, which is really important because the varietal I've chosen for you today is famous with phosphoric acidity and bright flavor notes.
So the decisions Patrik have made lead to, I think, better drinks often. He's using a second grinder. He's using a different coffee specifically for the milk course. This becomes hard when you get into the signature drink to decide which coffee to choose. Do you blend them? How do you tie it all together? I think it is harder, but for your espresso and your milk course, I think you can net a larger score because you can pick a really specific coffee for each one. We'll see how he ties it all together for the safe drink, but I think for these first two courses, it's really smart. Patrik is basically making history here right now due to some rule changes. He added the lactase enzyme to a milk that he chose to break down that lactose. So he was able to pick an already delicious milk and make it even sweeter and more tasty. I think he's the only person that I've seen, at least in 2022, that did that. Several people in finals used lactose-free milk. I did as well. But for Patrik to actually add lactase and take a milk that he knows the profile for, that's slightly higher in fat, all those good things, my guess is he probably had really slamming milk drinks. They've since changed the rule. You cannot add anything to milk. You could buy a lactose-free milk. You cannot create your own. So this thing right here will never be repeated until they decide to change the rules, if they do.
Steaming my milk to 50 degrees Celsius. And today that brings out a lot of clarity and flavor transparency. Now, after this serving, I'm gonna ask you to please flip those cards around. And on the backside, you're gonna read a little bit more about these two varietals. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of extra time so you can all chat together and flip the card back and see if you can have time to actually write those down, okay?
I think it's interesting to try and get your judges to talk. This is something that is hard. They're still very not used to it. Even I've had judges recently, they are allowed to say thank you when you give them a drink. I really enjoyed it as a competitor. I gave them feedback that I liked it, but the judges even had debates on whether they should be saying thank you. Does it interrupt the competitor? Does it make them feel weird? I think that Patrik is maybe a little bit ahead of the curve here. I think probably next year the judges will open up even more. You could get them to talk to each other or to you more. Currently, though, in this is the old rules. That framework wasn't totally there yet, so I think he's slightly ahead of the curve on this, but I still think it's a great idea.
Enjoy. Now, please enjoy and don't forget to learn more about those two varietals. Now, were you able to figure out which two varietals we have? Don't worry, even if you didn't, I have you covered. I didn't just choose these two coffees because they taste absolutely fantastic. I chose them because I think they perfectly represent just how amazing specialty coffee varietals can taste. And this wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the perfect cultivation and local terroir by Rachel and her team at the Esmeralda farm in Panama. They've done a fantastic job with this coffee. Both coffees grow up about 1,600 meters, which gives the coffee plenty of time to ripen and develop all of those beautiful sugars. The coffees are then hand-picked at perfect ripeness, rinsed and put on raised beds for a total of 40 plus days. This really brings out a beautiful fruit sensation for each coffee. For your espresso course, you had my favorite geisha varietal, bursting with stone fruit character and florality. And for milk beverage, you had a beautiful SL34. This one is a fun one, a little bit different. Originally from Kenya, but cultivated and elevated at the Esmeralda farm. Absolutely fantastic. Now, for my...
So, Patrik does something really interesting here. The way he structured his theme by keeping it secret, he did not need to provide any origin information until the moment that it fit. Typically, when we serve, you have to do it, if you have multiple coffees, you have to do it before each course to make sure the judge knows what's going on. But this way, he was able to suspend that and put it right where it fits. He can talk about the coffees, he put them all together, and let him introduce the farm in one sentence. Because this is another thing I often find hard. Even if you have two coffees from one farm, you have to introduce both of them separately often, or it feels disjointed. So I like the way he did that. Also, Patrik has a way, and we've seen this in some other sets, where he has a way of sneaking in his message or the thing he wants without hitting you over the head. So Patrik this year cared a lot about the idea of terroir, about coffees tasting like they're from a certain place and being processed in a really specific and careful way to maintain that sense of place where you can taste the characteristics of the farm and the producer. And Rachel Peterson from Esmeralda is really careful of this. She doesn't over ferment her coffees at all. And so it's a subtle move, but Patrik here is preaching what he believes, and I think it's a nice way to do it in this sort of quiet way.
My final serving today. What I want to do is I want to continue to explore those beautiful flavor notes, especially in the geisha varietal, because that's my favorite. So for my signature beverage, I'm starting by adding 4 shots of that beautiful geisha for a total of 80 grams. My next ingredient is a sugar syrup that I made myself. It consists of tonka beans and lime peel. First, I added 12 grams of those beautiful tonka beans. They're famous for its beautiful brown spice quality and vanilla-like character. When I mix that together with the lime flavors, lemon flavors in my espresso, it turns a beautiful flavor note of red cherry cola.
So tonka bean is the theme we've seen over most of the presentations is an ingredient that can taste like other things. Tonka bean is a classic version of that. It is used to replace vanilla sometimes because vanilla is quite expensive. It has a bit of an almondy flavor to it too, like amaretto, and it can also have a cherry flavor. So if you think about what cola tastes like, he just made a cherry cola call. Tonka could easily sort of fit into that. I think it's a really smart ingredient to use. It is sort of an exciting ingredient. People don't taste it that often, but it really does taste like other things and is quite complex. So its interaction with coffee might bring out one form of it more than another. So I think that's a really smart ingredient to use.
The lime peel is amazing, so I chopped in 12 grams of that as well. Has a beautiful florality and citrus quality. And when mixed to those beautiful orange blossom aromatics, we get a new floral sensation of jasmine and green apples in this drink. Lastly, I chucked in 500 grams of a glucose powder. I know it sounds a lot, but I'll explain why later. Glucose has a perfect sweetness. It integrates beautifully without overpowering the flavor notes, because it's all about that espresso and geisha varietal, right?
If I had to guess, glucose is sweet. It is not as sweet as sucrose or fructose. So what might be happening here is Patrik is elevating the sweetness of his drink, but it's probably giving him a little bit of body as well, giving him a bit more texture to the drink than if you added sucrose. If you added plain table sugar, you would add a lot of sweetness and the body would move up a little bit just because sugars are thicker than water. But by adding glucose, he's probably getting more thickness without quite overpowering you with sweetness.
The additional sweetness, together with those beautiful stone fruit characters, generates a new flavor note of mango in this beverage. The final step there is to take 1 liter of water, chuck all of these ingredients together in what is called a thermomixer. I use 60 minutes at 60 degrees Celsius. And this is really important because I'm not just extracting flavor. I'm extracting sweetness, acidity, and bitterness because I'm looking for perfect balance. And then we need all of it, right? I'm adding 15 grams of this to my espressos. The next ingredient is 50 grams of ice. Ice dilutes the strength a little bit, just enough to open up those beautiful flavor notes. And it chills the beverage, which adds to complexity and flavor clarity. The final step is going to be to mix it all together because I want to aerate it and really elevate those beautiful textures. So please bear with me while I make a little bit of noise.
Using ice is always risky because you don't know how much dilution you're going to have unless you use it a lot. The one thing I do like about ice though is it is actually more efficient at cooling a beverage than stone ice cubes or metal ice cubes. So there's a trade-off there. I like ice. I haven't really used it much other than many, many years ago because it is risky on the dilution. But I think it's a smart one to look at. If you really want a cold drink, using ice will always give you a colder drink than using like a metal stone.
I'm going to do this for a total of 10 seconds.
This is a how old am I throwback, but for many years there was actually a blender sponsor at most of the barista competitions at like nationals and worlds, and then people stopped using blenders and it fell out of vogue. And then I think since then not many competitions have blender sponsors. And just when blenders became popular again, we don't have any blender sponsors. So if you own a blender company, hit up the WBC.
All done. For flavor notes, I'd like you to please note down the following. We're going to find mango, jasmine, green apples, and that beautiful red cherry cola. And that would have not been possible if it wasn't for the amazing flavor quality of my espresso with that beautiful tonka bean. It's such a cool combination.
So all the things we've talked about where Patrik can save time, the places he spends time you should look at. He gives tasting notes very slowly. And this is key. Spend a bit of time. If you haven't judged before, I haven't judged before, and this was really useful for me. Take your tasting notes and try and write them out. Try and write them out without hearing them or seeing how long it's going to take you. It takes a long time, especially if the words are long. This isn't something that I never really thought about before. It's one thing to say that it tastes like rose. It's another thing to say that it tastes like pink grapefruit. It's a much longer word. So Patrik spacing it this way, it takes more time. It can be risky, but that way you're pacing the judges really, really well. So I would say no matter what you do, spend a bit of time writing out how long does it take to put down 3 calls or a body call or a texture call, and then try and pace your speech in a way that when you get to those notes, you are slowing down. It gives a lot of intentionality. It's really kind to the judges, and I think they reward you for it.
Now, I want you to please hold off by tasting this until I finish my presentation. The first sip is going to be all about that tropical sensation and beautiful jasmine florals. That second sip is going to be juicier, which is contrasting that beautiful texture of the first sip, giving you a much more complex experience. And flavor-wise, we're focusing on the beautiful malic and apple qualities. Both sips has this amazing aftertaste of red cherry cola. Now, I want to thank you for the opportunity of being here today. It's been really fun. and I hope it's been for you guys as well. And I'm sure at this point you're asking yourself, why on earth did this guy force me to guess the varietals? Well, it's because it's important. We're in an exciting time in specialty coffee. We're moving into the future. And I wanted to take the very heart and soul and hero of the specialty coffee industry with us, that beautiful varietal. Now, please enjoy. Time.
So a really clean, polished set. I think Patrik is a good presenter. He speaks really eloquently and clearly. I think it's interesting that he used both Gesha and NSL. We don't see many SLs on the world stage, but when they're great, they're really, really good. Martin from Kenya used an SL variety as well, so I think there's a good case to be made to use this variety in competition. It is hard because, like Patrik said, it has more acidity. He put it in the milk course, which worked really well. I think there's a lot of good strategic decisions here. The big thing for me when I watch Patrik is I know how much he cares about coffee and coffee quality. And so I would say his biggest strength is something that we often don't experience, which is the quality in the cup. So I wish I could have tasted those drinks. They look delicious, and he did a great job.